Welcome to this week's edition of Red Zone Extra, brought to you in part by Big O Tires. I'm Herbie Tiopi, filling in for Blair Kirchhoff, who hopefully is still watching us from his living room in beautiful Kansas City, Missouri. I'm joined right now by my esteemed colleague, Vahe Gregorian. Sam McDowell will be joining us shortly. Vahe, a lot to digest tonight in this stunning loss. Is that the perfect way to put this 35-32 loss to the Titans?
I think jarring, and you say a lot to digest, a lot that's indigestible too. I think that's part of the process of unpacking this, right? A lot that you just find hard to accept in the way this loss came about.
And I think the biggest storyline coming out of this game is special teams just absolutely was not special at all. And life comes at you in the National Football League when you consider Harrison Butker won the Special Teams Player of the Week award last week, had a missed point after attempt, but there were two huge plays that really defined this loss. And I know you wrote about it, so what did you see in this game?
Well, I think a couple things happened that we almost never seen. I don't really even remember a blocked kick, although theoretically Harrison Butker's kick last week, game-winning kick, was blocked, right? A finger on it. But I certainly don't remember a completely blown exchange between two really steady, completely reliable guys, right? James Winchester and Dustin Colquitt. They've been working together since 2015, and I don't know how we can quantify how many snaps they've taken together, but I'm sure it's in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. And we've certainly never in a game before seen any situation where, I mean, certainly there have been exchanges where it wasn't ideal or something's gone a little bit off, but never where Dustin Colquitt had to pass or run. So that was a first, and of all times for it to happen, right? You just kind of think, as the Chiefs are coming into the last 2 minutes there, that there's 8 factors in their favor, and every one of them just went the wrong way.
And so our viewers understand what we're talking about here on that play there. The Chiefs had an opportunity. They were going to kick a field goal or attempt a field goal, an opportunity. They were holding a 32-27 lead at that point, an opportunity to go up 8 with less than 2 minutes left. Bad snap results in Colquitt scooping the ball up and then tries to throw it away, gets called for intentional grounding, and then it just spirals out of control from there.
And I will say it didn't have to spiral out of control from there, but there was something about the nature of that play that just made you feel like all bets are off. This is just freakish, frantic, flips the field, changes the script, and yet I think the term we all used earlier was something of this nature. The defense was free to stop the Titans at that point.
I mean, to me, that's the most. Of course, when you only have 16 NFL games in a season, when you lose one of them, it's gigantic. And I think that they played themselves out of the potential of a first-round bye with this loss today. So that obviously is huge. But to me, what worries you most going forward is we kind of thought this defense might be, for lack of a better term, fixed. The past 2 weeks, they showed that a lot of good things against 2 good offenses at that. Last 3 weeks, really, when you include Denver. Of course, I'm not going to include them in the good offense part of this.
Right.
But still, and then the defense had an opportunity to win the game today, and they didn't. And they had a really good opportunity to win the game because last week they had to stop Kirk Cousins with all the time in the world. Mm-hmm. This week, all they had to do was stop Ryan Tannehill without timeouts, with a minute and 20 seconds to go 60 yards, and he's got to get a touchdown, not just a field goal.
Right.
Defense has to come up with a stop there.
Yeah, and also the fact that I can't remember the exact term that Frank Clark used, but he did use the term we were soft on that last drive. We made some plays, but we were soft, and he sort of made the point that Tannehill's runs were a pretty big factor in that too. I mean, we're pretty focused on Derrick Henry, but that first play continued to set that tone, right? Didn't you start? You just we're just observers. We don't know how it's going to play, but you sort of start feeling like, this is getting to be a little problematic.
There were just like you mentioned, Vi, or at least alluded to it. There's so many things on the checklist to where if they were able to check one box in the last 2 minutes, they win the game. Which, and something I brought up earlier with you, Herbie, is you had all 8 of those things as an opportunity to sort of start off your game story with, and I think we're just curious what stood out the most to you about these 8 things that went wrong.
But it's the Titans. It is, for one reason or another, the Kansas City Chiefs have an issue against the Tennessee Titans. This is their 4th straight loss against Tennessee. And what's amazing about this is head coach Andy Reid is now 1-8 against the Titans. He's one of 7 coaches in NFL history to have set 200 or more career wins, but he's 1-8 against the Titans. For one reason or another, the Titans seem to have the Chiefs' number, and they tend to win in some crazy ways.
If you didn't know that stat, how many guesses would you need to have before you guessed that was the team that he's 1-8 against? There's no logic to it.
Right, and that's sort of part of the oddity too, right? It's as we talked about earlier, different quarterbacks, different matchups, different opposing coaches, different places, different circumstances. Just somehow one of those nemeses, if that's the plural of the word. It's just that way.
At what point is it no longer a small sample size?
Well, and the crazy thing is,
he's got 9 games now.
And Vahe, you mentioned earlier how many times have Dustin Colquitt and James Winchester gone through that snapping process? The one time they have a bad time to against the Titans, it's like, what is it about the Tennessee Titans? I will give James Winchester a lot of credit, though. After the game, and I know you were over there talking to him, but I got in there late. He stood at his locker room. He knew the media was going to come in there looking for him, and he stood there and he answered a lot of tough questions. What was your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, look, I think this. We can understand the nature of the miscommunication a little more specifically, and there was some kind of physical count. It wasn't. I don't think it was a hand gesture. I think maybe it was a head gesture that was going to be.
It does seem like the usual, and just to sort of ask you to clarify if this is how you understood it. It seems like the usual signal is he looks up at Butker and stares at him until he gets the go-ahead, and then he looks back.
I think that's exactly right.
Once he looks back, that's sort of Winchester's cue. And I just wondered afterwards if Winchester looked down, saw he was looking at him, and thought he'd already made that move.
I think it was along those lines. James didn't quite elaborate that much, although he did stand in the pocket and take the questions, and both those guys were obviously the kind of people that will do that. They both were ready to address it. The point that Dustin and James made really was that Dustin looked up to Butker, as he usually does, the very point you were just making, and somehow James took that to be the head move was towards him. I don't know the exact gesture he would make, but it was basically that. So James started to snap and then actually tried to stop because he realized.
That's why it was low.
And that accounts for the bad snap too.
Yeah.
So it was the combination of things, just a crazy thing. And meanwhile, though, of course, we got the rush coming off the edge. That's a different play. Never mind.
Go ahead and break that.
All these things on one play.
I'm sort of just imagining how many times in practice Dustin Colquitt is just going to be doing this, and they're just got to practice the head nod over and over again all week now.
Well, and what I don't know exactly, and maybe it's a little hectic in the locker room afterwards. You only get a minute or so with a couple of these guys, and I think they would have taken more questions, but it was just kind of tightening up on us, so we didn't get to ask more. But I do think a thing that stood out to me was Dustin used the term that all 5 reps today they did the same thing. So
maybe it's sort
there
of
was
like
something a little different
that changes
a
little bit. Yeah.
But what is interesting in the block kick later was that Tennessee players were talking about how the Chiefs had not changed their cadence all day, and that was part of why he got a running jump that appeared to be at first blush and offside, but I feel like we watched this together and thought, even though it was one angle we saw, I felt pretty much like it wasn't offside.
I agree.
What Tyreek Hill said about that play, because you watched from the sidelines, he said it was something out of Madden.
Yeah, I saw that he said that.
He timed that jump perfectly. It was like something out of a video game.
That was fire, I think.
That gives a source to it, though. That would give a source to why they were able to do that, though.
Yeah, it's so in a weird way, those kind of things somehow all work together, right? The cadence.
Sure.
Something was going wrong with the communication at the end, but yet it was something that related to the Titans' ability to read it a little bit on the last one.
Yeah.
So who knew you had to shake that up that much?
I'm sort of curious because while you were talking to those guys, Herbie and I were kind of roaming the locker room elsewhere, and I know Sam wrote about this, but I think we should put it out there anyway. Damian Williams in the locker room was unlike really you see after a regular season game, at least. I mean, he's staring straight ahead. I wondered if he had blinked in the last 15 minutes.
Still in his uniform.
Still in his uniform,
Yeah.
full pads and everything. Nobody else in that locker room still in their uniform, and it's almost like I mean, there's just a single tear streaming down his face.
Yeah.
And you wonder just the emotions that were going through him because it wasn't the right time to quite approach him. And then by the time he had gone eventually, and I think it was 15, 20 minutes after. To shower and come back out, we were pushed out of the locker room, and not because of that, but just the way the timing worked out. So that really stood out to me in the locker room. Herbie, I know you were with 4 or 5 guys afterwards. I'm wondering if there's 1 or 2 things that really stood out to you in that locker room.
It's stunning to them, and here's the crazy thing about this. All right, here we are talking about some areas about this game, and we haven't even touched on Patrick Mahomes' return. And that's how crazy this loss was to the Tennessee Titans. Mahomes was Patrick Mahomes.
Everybody's story in this game.
Yeah,
for the first 55 minutes.
There's so many angles that in the last 5 minutes of this game, we haven't even touched on Mahomes yet, but we'll get to him. I'm sure you guys want to know how he did, but we'll get to him shortly. There's a sense of stunned bewilderment, emotions in that locker room.
I agree. I thought they were surprised by how this game finished.
Damian Wilson, I was over there chatting with him, and he just said, hey, I have never seen anything like this in my years in the National Football League. And of course, he follows up with the classic Bill Parcells cliche, it is what it is. But a lot of players were very stunned at this. And you mentioned the defense. To me, I think they had an opportunity to really step up on that last drive, but also in the second half. They had an opportunity to stop a guy that they knew was coming at him, in Derrick Henry. And Henry just really had a good second half and kept the Titans in the game. He was the main reason why they were in the game. Yes, Tannehill had a good last drive, but if not for Henry, they're not in that position. You know, he had a 68-yard touchdown run. He had a 1-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter on a 10-play drive, and on that 10-play drive, he had 7 touches.
He set up his own touchdown run.
Yeah.
If only they had read your story going into the game, they would have known this was going to be an issue.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, you can point to a lot of these plays this way, and like, okay, Damian Williams doesn't fumble, the game's totally different. Henry doesn't.
Which might explain his emotion.
I know, and we're only guessing, right? But I would bet if I were a betting man
return for 6 points.
Yep.
I mean,
It's a touchdown.
They had all the momentum in this game when that fumble occurred.
They did, and if Henry doesn't have a 68-yard run, his numbers look different. But also, if McCole Hardman doesn't do a ridiculous play, I mean, an amazing play on an amazing pass from Mahomes that was actually overlooked by the play.
I was going to say,
right?
The run was what stood out to you on that.
Well, initially it was. It's like I couldn't, and I've said this to myself 15 times this season or 10 times with him. I really can't believe the burst he has, and then he does it again and surprises you.
I agree with you. It's not just the breakaway speed; it's how quickly he gets to that speed.
Yeah,
that shocks you with him.
Yeah, it was, and then of course the Mahomes contorting jump pass. It still makes no sense for a guy that we wondered if it was okay if he was going to play, and we can go back to Mahomes. But the last point I was going to make there was just, but the game has sustained all these things, and now we're in that last 2 minutes, and that's where we were. And it was just drizzling through
the
the
game
hands.
was lost. I mean, that's what we focused. It's where the game was lost.
The best thing about that part too is, and I'm going to use Damian Wilson's quote to me. He's like, in the National Football League, anything can happen. Today, anything happened, and that's basically it. But
and then happened again, and then happened
again.
Yeah,
but to Vahe's point earlier, and I guess we should talk about the man who actually returned to action today, because he really energized, into my opinion, the Chiefs' offense. We're talking obviously about Patrick Mahomes. Missed the last 2 games as he recovered from a dislocated right kneecap. 400 yards. I know you wrote about it.
Yeah, second highest total ever.
And
Rams game last year was the only other one, right?
I think the way I phrased it was Patrick Mahomes looked like Patrick Mahomes. I didn't see many limitations. I thought a couple of the biggest plays, or most noteworthy plays, because obviously the pass that Vahe mentioned was just absurd. It's once again him doing something that we just don't see covering football. But I thought him taking that hit in the first quarter and jumping up fine. And of course I asked him about it after the game, and he dismissed it and said he was confident going into the game that nothing was going to be wrong. But I think getting that first hit out of the way was pretty big because we saw the very first play of the game should have been intercepted.
Should have been.
Yeah.
And was ruled an
it was
interception.
initially ruled an interception, and I just thought getting that hit out of the way, he sort of cruised afterwards and decided, hey, I am okay. And we saw him scramble a couple of times now, not to run downfield, but just to extend plays a little bit. And of course, the jump play, you've got to be confident in your knee because you're landing on it. And I know Herbie was in there, and may have even been the one that asked McCole Hardman. He had no idea that Patrick Mahomes had thrown the ball that way.
Yeah,
That's right.
He had
that was
zero
funny.
idea, and because he said the ball came out funny, and Mahomes
Just his motion. It's sort of like if you're a batter, you know exactly where the pitcher's arm slot's going to be. And I think he's used to that with Mahomes, even though he does change it a little bit. And I think he saw that pass so late, and he was wondering why.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you remember, Mahomes actually addressed that play at post game where he mentioned he threw the ball and Hardman's back was still to him. So
Yeah.
when he immediately turned around, he didn't actually see him jump up. But that was just a phenomenal play.
You're right. That's important to note here, though, because I think maybe the three of us and Sam as well and Blair have been wondering, seeing McCole Hardman's playing time go down offensively. And part of that certainly is because Tyreek Hill's healthy. There was a stretch where he wasn't.
Sammy Watkins is healthy.
Sammy Watkins as well. But the only thing that we've seen maybe go against McCole Hardman this year it's been a couple times where his timing's been off with Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes has been very candid about the fact that he thought Hardman should have done something different on the route.
Yeah.
So I thought Herbie's note there of the fact that Hardman, he said, did exactly what I wanted him to do on that play was pretty noteworthy.
That's a really good point that I wouldn't have thought of till you brought it back up that way, because McCole, actually, I think his snaps might have been up a little with more in there. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's been diminishing. But today, I asked him specifically in the locker room, because I thought it was his first offensive snap, and he said he'd been in a couple other times, but it was his first target.
It was his first target.
Yeah, his only target.
And only target.
He threw the ball 50 times today.
He threw 50 times. The only thing I wondered about with Patrick was, and it started from the get-go on the first play, I thought he could have run on that first play, and it was a lot of open field.
You're right.
And he decided not to, and he decided to throw pretty against the grain, almost as if, I don't know if he was trying to make a statement like, I can do this, or a statement, I'm not going to run.
Yeah, I thought it was more of the former.
Yeah.
I thought they had that play queued up. Obviously, they had that play queued up coming into the game, and I thought he took a shot.
Yeah, and it was a reckless shot actually for him. I mean, and look, we've seen Tyreek Hill come up with that ball, but he comes up with that ball as a special play. It's not to be assumed that you're going to just throw that there, and you don't have to. Which anyway, the whole thing, as I look on the sheet, I mean, Patrick really didn't run once. Which reminds me of his mom's tweet the other day that she had grounded him from running in this game. So
He listened to you.
I can't believe she overruled Andy on that.
The curious thing to me, well, not necessarily curious, but it really emphasized that Mahomes' chemistry with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Because if of his 50 completions, a little bit less than half of them were to Tyreek Hill and Kelce, and I believe Hill had
searched for him all day.
11 catches on 19 targets, right?
19
targets.
Yeah.
Kelce was 7 of 7, thrown just 7 times, 7 targets. So
I'd be shocked if Patrick has ever targeted one guy 19 times since he's been a Chief. I think that's.
Well, let's just throw it out there. He's never done it.
Yeah, there we go. So I don't have to be shocked. Yeah. And it's sort of a little lost in the shuffle here. I don't know if something was wrong with Sammy Watkins, but he dropped a couple that you might call, drops strong sometimes, right? There's a difference between dropped and catchable, right? And so it's a little bit of a blunt way to put it.
I think both of those should have been
that one over the middle,
absolutely,
and then the one dropped in on him.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then, but the play that stood out to me was, I think it might have been the play right before McCole Hardman's touchdown, or certainly just before it. It was a little pass out in the flat, or maybe, I don't know how he got the ball, but he had no acceleration.
It was a handoff.
It was a handoff, there you go.
It was a handoff.
It was no acceleration and no aggressiveness. He just kind of went out of bounds. He's a fierce runner usually.
Yeah, it almost looked like he was trying to deep the defense into thinking he didn't have the ball. It was bizarre the way he took the handoff.
And I might be wrong, but I think it was within the next play or two that suddenly you saw Pringle and Hardman lined up left on that play that was the Hardman touchdown.
On third down.
On third down, yeah.
We mentioned the good, we mentioned the bad, but let's
go to the ugly?
Let's go to the ugly right now, because we have to digest really what did we take away from this loss. There was a lot to come out of this. Chiefs had a lot of penalties. The lost fumble you mentioned earlier, they're now 1-2 because they've lost they've lost fumbles in 3 straight games. They went 1-2 in that stretch. A lot of penalties. The special teams, they're now 6-4. Okay, they're 6-4. 6 games left. 4 of those games are coming against AFC West opponents. They only hold a half-game lead over the Oakland Raiders now. What's our biggest takeaway from this? Vahe, you first, since you're the columnist.
Well, look, I think you can feel okay about where Patrick is. First of all, I think, right. I mean, maybe it's one of those things where they have to see how he feels tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's a big exhale to just start off with here, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like, okay, I'm going to trust their decision, but I'm still going to be gritting my teeth. And I think you feel like, okay, he's good. So that's pretty big. I still feel like we're seeing some more good things out of the defense, but they're not creating enough turnovers. They were lucky, I think, to get that fumble ruled in their favor today.
I agree.
I felt like Tannehill had it. And I'm not sure the technicality of the ruling, but I felt like it was just a good break for the Chiefs there. But the defense, to me, still is not rising to the occasion when it needs to most, and not consistently, right? And here you have a new Exhibit A, which is they had a chance to win the game today, and they didn't. And they need to come through there for you to feel good about where this season's heading. Yeah. And I think you can live with the loss. You can live with being 6-4. There were some bizarre things in here, but in the end, actually, my big takeaway is this was a chance for the defense to say, yeah, we really are on this trajectory, and they didn't say it.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of echo that, but 6-4, you've got a team now that's going to be fighting for the division, fighting for the playoff lives, and probably 2 things that I think we all sort of assumed were going to be a given this season, especially after the way those first 4 weeks went. It's not just 6-4. This team started 4-0.
Yes.
They've lost 4 out of 6 games, and you can blame the fact that you missed Mahomes for one of those games, but he still lost 3 of his last 5.
They have lost, am I right about this? The last 3 games Mahomes has started and finished, they've lost.
Correct.
Yeah?
Correct.
That's a little weird.
Yeah, but obviously today's not on him with the.
No, but I'm just saying it's just it's showing that that's not.
Blame him. You're blaming him.
But I'm just saying it's not the trump card that you always thought it was.
You're right. Right, and part of that is because we thought this defense was getting better, and I said it earlier. I think the first round bye is out of the equation now based on losing this game, but you can win Super Bowls. You can get to Super Bowls and play in the wild card round. We've seen a lot of teams do that. But if this team wants to be one of them, the defense has to play the way it did the previous 3 weeks. Because, like you mentioned, even if you've got that unique guy at quarterback, you still have to play the other side of the ball. And as good as Patrick Mahomes was today, they failed him in the other 2 phases, special teams and defense. And you've got to have more than one phase of the game work in your favor in the NFL to win games.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do they turn the corner, Sam, in your opinion? With 6 games left, we always feel like we know what the identity of the Chiefs team is. And it seems it changes every other week. What needs to happen here is the last month and a half?
I thought going into this game that if you saw the Patrick Mahomes you're used to seeing, which we did today, that this team could be as good as any team in the AFC. Obviously, New England's always going to be the favorite, I think, as health pending. But I thought the way this defense was playing that they were on the right path to compete with anybody. And what I saw today, I just think, especially that last drive, letting Ryan Tannehill drive 60 yards on you, having to get a touchdown with no timeouts and 80 seconds. I just thought that was particularly concerning. I mean, you talked to defensive players, I did too. They thought it was concerning as well.
Well, yeah, and what's weird though is that you do get back to the whole thing where like the gateway to that was the botched field goal.
It was.
I mean, but it's just the gateway.
Exactly.
You know?
You still got an opportunity
Yeah.
to. It's just like, and I feel like I've made 3 baseball analogies now, but just because the guy behind you didn't get the run home doesn't mean you can't get the run home.
Right.
And the defense had an opportunity to pick up their teammates today, and they didn't do it. But one thing we should mention, and something else that I wrote about, Frank Clark saying tonight that he has been playing injured all season, not just missing those last 2 weeks. He told me at the end of training camp he had a pinched nerve, and that the reason he sat out the last 2 weeks is that pinched nerve got so bad that he's feeling burning sensations in his arm and numbness in his fingers, which is common with the pinched nerve. It's not common to play in the NFL with numbness in your fingers. And he said he's been timid this year because of it. He's been slow this year because of it. And a lot of people have probably been wondering why his production hasn't been what we saw in Seattle. He did have a sack today, and a lot of that was because Chris Jones just absolutely.
Oh, that play.
You know, it's the movie Blindside, him just driving the guy 20 yards backwards, and Tannehill's got to step up into that. But Clark still makes the play.
Yeah.
He had 4 solo tackles today, which is the second most he's had on the season.
Dropped interception.
He could have had an interception. But that's going to be something to monitor going forward because those things are tricky.
Yeah.
And here's the deal with that injury too. But he did play, but having him on the field now takes a lot of importance because head coach Andy Reid revealed after the game that Emmanuel Ogbah suffered a right pectoral muscle, so that's typically season ending. And so now the Chiefs are now hurting.
He leads them in sacks.
Yeah, and now you got to get Clark back. And I thought it was interesting that Sam did have that newser piece on Clark because it did shed a lot of light that this has been something that he's been dealing with since training camp.
You reminded me of this too that we haven't had a chance to address, but it bears mentioning that patchwork offensive line.
Yes.
At one point today, I mean, at one point today, it was one guy who started the season at his position, Austin Ryder.
Yeah.
And everybody, there were a couple guys that had been playing but played at other positions. And that sequence where the Iron Man, Mitchell Schwartz, goes down, then the next play, Rankin goes down, and that looked like a severe injury. At least Schwartz came back, by the way, I should add, but his streak was broken.
Say that injury?
Reed basically said that Rankin will know more after Monday's MRI, but here's the telling thing. They immediately ruled him out.
Well, they immediately carted him and immediately ruled him out.
Yeah.
And
He was
he
carted
was
off.
in crutches in the locker room after the game as well. But the offensive line, you know, you thought maybe they had a little bit of depth there. That's gone when you've got 3 injuries. And the defensive line, I thought that would been the strength and one of the reasons they're getting more sacks is those guys have been fresh. They've been cycling in and out to the games, and now when you've got injuries there and you've got to play more often, Herbie actually said something on the very last play, the Titans touchdown. He said Chris Jones is gassed. And sure enough, he hardly rushed on that last play, and the Titans get a touchdown. If those guys had to play every game, they're less effective.
You said, or I heard one of you guys say something to the effect of this is on the defensive backs now, or something to that effect, because
They mentioned that because he thought that the defensive line was gassed.
Yeah,
the
there was not
defensive
gonna-
backs were going to be the guys that make the play.
Linebackers too, but
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, why they were so gassed late in the second half goes back to Derrick Henry. You know, Mike Vrabel told the Tennessee Titans reporters that they noticed that those 10-yard runs, those 12-yard runs from Henry are because the defense was tired. And they noticed it. They really noticed it.
Well, and I don't know this stat, but Frank Clark brought up the stat that Henry is known for better yardage in the second half.
Yes.
And it makes sense. He wears you down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
A big physical back.
yeah.
Speaking of rushing in the second half, just because we have been asked about it a few times, the 3rd and 2 call where they passed the ball, I just wondered from both of you guys' perspectives what you thought of, when the Chiefs are trying to ice the game, if they get a first down, the game's over. They pass the ball, and Mahomes ends up sliding down, which is a super heads-up play to make the Titans use that last timeout. Of course, it doesn't end up mattering, but it could have. But 3rd and 2, they've got an opportunity there to ice the game, and he calls a screen play.
I mean, look, in the moment I remember thinking, what are they doing? But then when you just reflect on it for a minute, because Patrick's so smart, it was basically the same effect as a run play. It was just a different way of going about hoping you could get the first. I mean, you get the first, the game's over. Patrick made it less harmful by not throwing it away and sliding. Made them use the last time out. I think you got most of what you wanted out of that, or at least you didn't hurt yourself from that.
Yeah, what happened on that play, because Mahomes explained it.
Yeah.
You were in there for Mahomes' explanation. What did he say on that play?
I didn't quite hear exactly what he said.
I think it was a technical. It was going to go to Blake Bell.
It was going to go to Blake Bell, but I can't remember where he said somewhere in there that the play broke down.
Yeah.
I want to say it's just that a defender stayed home. I don't think it was anything on the Chiefs' end.
I think so too. I think that's.
I don't think you can question Reed's mentality though to throw there, because that's basically what he will do. He's not necessarily a running kind of guy, and I think if you want on the biggest play of the game, put it in your best player's hands. I don't really have a problem with him making.
See, how many
Mahomes'
people, if they had,
hands.
would be saying exactly that?
Right.
Would be saying, why didn't you put the ball in your best player's hands to win the game? You've got an
Right.
opportunity. Mitchell Schwartz pointed this out after the game. He said, I hope nobody is criticizing our coach right now because he ran that exact same play against Baltimore.
Yeah.
And it worked, and it got the first down. And
Yeah.
nobody said afterwards, why are you passing here? Because it worked. They had completed, and this is downfield. He completes 36 out of 50, 72% of his passes today. This is among the safest calls that they had today. It just so happened the defense covered it. And I don't think that makes it the wrong decision to go for it.
I don't either. And again, if it's thrown away, the clock stops. You don't make them use their last time out. Maybe you feel different about it. But a smart guy made a smart play, made the best of the situation.
Still a makeable
And
field.
exactly, well within his range.
For sure.
Just didn't work out.
Will the Chiefs get an extra day of rest coming up the following week, because the next game they have is the Chargers in Mexico City? What do they need to concentrate on this coming week here before playing two straight AFC West opponents? Shane.
I think mostly the in the trenches stuff, because that's where the Chargers are not great offensive line. So your defensive line needs to dominate that game. And the reverse way, the reason you need to concentrate on the opposite is because they are good on the defensive line. Melvin Ingram's a fantastic pass rusher. And if your tackles are beat up, I'm super interested to see what Eric Fisher's status is going to be for this upcoming week. Because last time he tried to practice, he had a setback, and they decided he's not ready yet. And then he tried to give it a go on Friday. None of us thought he was going to play, but it was good to see him get back out there. And you wonder what that means for his status coming back around the other side of the week. Because, like I said, if Mitchell Schwartz is hobbled and you're missing the other tackle, and obviously you're missing some guys in between, I think that's going to be a major factor in the game.
And Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. You got to get him back, too.
I think I overheard a conversation that he sort of implied he's close in the locker room after the game.
Well, and I mean, I really nothing to add to that. I mean, I think that's it. They got to get better on their health. I mean, they got to get healthier. I mean, I know that injuries are a big part of the NFL, but this seems quite inordinate, actually, to me.
Just that one sequence was unbelievable. Like, Tyreek goes down.
Yes.
Then he hops back up. So I'm sure that Chiefs fans out there are just
lands on his shoulder and elbow.
Yeah.
I think it might be something.
Look too similar.
Yeah.
And I think they're probably like, oh, okay, everything's okay. Very next play, Mitchell Schwartz goes out. Very next play, Rankin goes out with a serious injury. It was just, and you just sort of thought, how much more can this team absorb in that category?
Yeah, I mean, I get the next man up thing, but at some point there is no next man.
The reason the guy is listed atop the depth chart is he's the preferred choice.
The preferred choice. And look, so I can't remember who said this, but I think the notion was that they were a guy away from having tight ends playing tackle, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, so folks out there who didn't actually see that section of the game or came and joined the game late, what they're talking about here is Schwartz went down at right tackle, knee injury, listed as questionable to
First
return.
time he's ever missed
Yes.
a snap.
First play.
Martinez Rankin shifts from left guard to right tackle, and then on the very next play he goes down with a knee injury, and then all of a sudden you had a lot of moving pieces because the Chiefs only had two other offensive linemen on the sideline, and that was Nick Allegretti and Stefan Wisniewski. Thankfully, Schwartz was able to come back, but this is a situation, as you mentioned, that we're going to have to watch very closely as the week progresses. When does Laurent Duvernay Tardif return and Eric Fisher? Is he close to coming back? If not, would not surprise me one bit on Tuesday. We start hearing the Chiefs bring in a lot of offensive linemen to work out.
Jeff Allen's still out there.
Yeah, and Jeff Allen makes perfect sense because he's a plug-and-play kind of guy.
Multiple positions.
It kind of surprised me they let him go, but the offensive line is going to be a big piece of this going forward.
Nick Allegretti had two offensive snaps before today, and Steph, do you pronounce it Stefan?
Yeah, he goes Stefan.
Stefan Wisniewski had 15 snaps as a Chief, and that was, but they treaded water fine, right, for the little bit that they were in there.
They
was just
give a
getting
sack
to the half and no sacks. Was there one sack of Patrick today? Two, but it wasn't with that group.
It didn't come with that group.
Yeah,
that is true.
The second one was where he gave
Yeah,
himself up
yeah,
to
yeah.
continue the clock.
That's correct.
He throws
That's
that ball
right.
away.
Yeah,
Otherwise.
yeah, right.
So before we close out here, gentlemen, here's the question. I mentioned there's something about the Titans. Do we chalk this up as there's something about the Titans, or should we be genuinely concerned about this team?
Defensively, I think you have to think differently than you did last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Less optimistic about what this defense is capable of, I think.
Yeah, or at least what it's demonstrated it will do when it comes to that, right? I mean, I still think it's capable of something, but at some point, what you do is who you are, and it's not far enough along to have faith in it right now that's going to be the difference maker on that last Saturday in January in Foxborough.
Yeah.
If it should come to that, right? I mean, and I do feel like I've had that mentality all along, like, which is probably why I'm a little more, I don't know if patience the right word, but I mean, I sort of feel like the ebb and flow of this is the ebb and flow of this until they're actually in peril from getting in the playoffs or something.
Sure.
It's about building to that.
And I think you're absolutely correct, gentlemen, because let's face it, they have the driver's seat in the AFC West. But these next two games are critical. Yes, it's the Chargers and Raiders, and I know a lot of people out there, man, it's the Chargers and Raiders, but they're divisional foes, and you just toss out records, you toss out statistics whenever the Chiefs play the Chargers, the Broncos, or the Raiders, because anything can and will happen in those games.
It can, but I don't remember the updated number, but this is this is funny. It's going to come to this a little bit, right? So we've got the Andy 1-8 versus the Titans thing. We've also got the whatever Andy is 21-3 against the AFC West.
Dominant.
And at some point, that's going to even out a little. For the sake of Chiefs fans, I let's hope it's not in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I just
next 3 weeks, really, with
just
the bye.
because it seems like we're winding down. Before we sign off, I just think we should acknowledge that tomorrow's Veterans Day, and we've got a guy here in the seat.
That's exactly right.
One of our own. So I think we should just say Happy Veterans Day to our guy. And what stands out to you? What are you gonna? First of all, tomorrow you're just gonna be traveling home.
Yes, I'm not really doing anything. It's the first time ever.
He's still writing the story. You're still going to be checking kansascity.com for the story. But still, I just wondered if there's anything you like to do on Veterans Day.
Well, typically, Veterans Day is a time for me. This is the first time I'm actually going to be working on Veterans Day. Even you're traveling. I consider traveling for the job. That's work. And not only that, I have to write snap counts in the morning. But usually, I will take in the parade. There are two holidays for most veterans that are sacred. Veterans Day obviously is one, and the other one Memorial Day.
Sure.
Memorial Day, I'll typically go off and visit a cemetery, and I happen to live on Fort Leavenworth, and thankfully they have a national cemetery over there as well. But thank you for that. I think that's the nicest thing Sam McDowell
He'll
has
surprise
done
you now
for
and
me.
then.
He surprised me with that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn this off, so I'm gonna let you sign us off.
Do the outro. Here we go. Sam McDowell, Sam McDowell,
I like that.
Gregorian. This
I
is
like
Herbie
that.
Tiobi signing off from Nissan Stadium. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for bearing with us.